Getting in shape should be a boring process. Welcome back. Well, I guess I should say welcome to whatever this is. YouTube, long form, podcast, you can call it kind of whatever you want. My name is Jake Parker. I'm a fitness and health coach. I usually post a lot of short form content, stuff on Instagram, but I am trying to expand the horizons a little bit, get into some of the longer form game because I think there's a lot of value here. There's a lot of opportunity in more nuance and more expanded conversation that I just don't think you can get on short form stuff. And I love short form. You can dive into a lot of different stuff, but I think going into some of these videos where it's a little bit more off the cuff, not as much scripted, a little bit more just kind of talking from the heart, going through stuff in a little bit more detail about some topics that I think apply to not only getting in shape, getting healthier, but improving your life in every aspect. And that's kind of what I'm a big proponent of is, yes, I am really passionate about the science, the physiology, the expertise, and the mechanisms of getting in shape, building better physique, health, lifestyle, all those types of things. But I'm a big proponent of the way that you do one thing is the way that you do everything else. And so my philosophy with fitness and with health and with coaching is, yes, we're trying to build a better physique, be more confident in all those areas, but it should affect everything else that you do in your life, because when you show up in one area in your fitness and you prove yourself, this is who I am. I'm someone who can show up, and I'm someone who can build the discipline and stick to the promises that I set with myself. You're able to do that in so many other ways. So that's what I kind of want this longer form stuff to be, an opportunity to really dive into some of those things and some of those nuances and what I've learned along the way with my own journey, and then just helping a lot of clients as well, reading a lot of really good stuff. So a lot of the stuff is not my own, but a lot of smarter people before me, and some of those things that I've learned along the way. This first video that I really wanted to make, or this first podcast, whatever you want to say, the topic I want to dive a little bit deeper on than I can in social media or in short form social media is in relation to getting in shape, which is more of my domain. It's going to be more boring than we ever think, and it's going to be longer than we ever think. And the more we can be accustomed and be in preparation for taking the boring road, it's actually what's going to lead to the best results. And we're gonna bear the most fruit when we can have this perspective that it should be long, it should be boring, and it's kind of all this is about. And so I got this idea a little bit from Drake Davis and SIP, his podcast, where he talked about doing things the long, hard, stupid way. And this was an idea that he got from, I believe, John Mark Comer. In his book Garden City. Fantastic author, also wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. If you haven't read those, definitely check them out. But with that podcast, and the reason it spoke to me so much and it inspired me to do something like this, was the idea of we are, by our human nature, are always wanting the results as quick as possible. We want the end goal, we want the outcome. How can I get there as quick as possible? What are the shortcuts? How can I, bypass all the reps, the hard work, the volume to get there? And he went on to say, you don't. And you take the long, hard, stupid way to get there, and it's actually the quickest way. And that he was, applying it to more the mental side of things and just kind of in general in life. And I really want to kind of dissect it into getting in the best shape of your life. It should be a boring process. If we can take the long, hard, stupid way, it's actually going to be the most effective process for us as well. And that's kind of what I want to dive in a little bit more deeper to here. There's an idea that I like to start with here, is that the results that we're getting at the present moment are a perfect representation of the processes that we have in place. So what does this mean? Our processes, or our systems, are basically a culmination of the habits and the non-negotiables that we have in our life. And the results that we get are a direct byproduct of those systems, of those processes. So if we're not in shape, if we're not happy with our physique, if we're not happy with where our health is at, it's a direct outcome of what our processes are and what our systems are to get us there. And so when we want to have these bigger goals, maybe we want to lose 20 pounds, we want to get in the best shape of our life, we want to increase our performance, feel better, feel more confident, we have to change our processes in order to get there. And I think a lot of people emphasize the change portion of that. And yes, that's important. We want to be set on the right way. We want to make sure our processes are pointing us in the right direction, because if we don't change those processes, we're going to get the exact outcome that we're at now. But with that being said, processes only work if we let them work, and we have to let them play out their time. So we have to expand our time horizons with a lot of these things, and we can't allow ourselves to fall victim to the boredom mindset, where we have to switch things up all the time. We have to think that things need change when they really don't. We just have to let the processes work. And so to start, whenever we are starting on a new process and we want to implement new systems, new processes to get to where we want to go, to increase or to change those outcomes that we want, because our outcomes are going to be a direct result of what our processes are and what we're doing right now. And the results that we're getting right now are going to be a direct outcome of what those processes look like. And I have a framework for how I like to approach, how do we reset these processes? How do we get from point A to point B, from from where we're at now? How do we change those processes so that they can contribute to that new outcome that we want while still not changing things all the time for the sake of changing things? And so I like going through this framework of executing, waiting, evaluating, and then adjusting. And the issue here is a lot of people bypass those first two, especially the second one, the waiting, and they maybe implement a new thing, or they maybe execute on this new plan, this new process for a short term, a little bit of time, but they don't let that process work. And we have to let the process work. We have to go through that waiting phase before we even think about evaluating or thinking about adjusting. So we have to look at the data. And if we look at the data and we actually wait and we see what the processes are yielding, are they yielding the new outcome that we want? And if not, then we can change those things. But so many people immediately jump to, they implement or they execute a little bit and then they immediately jump to the evaluating. It's been a week. Oh, I haven't seen any changes. Oh, I have to make an adjustment. So I have to swap. And James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, has this fantastic quote. And he says, "The greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom." And that's exactly what this is. A lot of the times we convince ourselves because we aren't seeing the progress that we want immediately that we have to change something. But most of the time, this just comes down to boredom. We have to be able to sit in that boredom. Those outcomes are going to be a direct result of the processes that we have. And if those processes are inconsistent, then our results are going to be inconsistent as well. And so I like thinking of this a lot in terms of, you see this a lot with people, the exercises they're choosing, or when they have a new training plan or something like that. We're trying to build muscle. And when they get to the gym, they start a new training plan. Maybe it's going really well for the first 4 weeks because you're trying all new exercises. You have a bunch of new machines. You're going to see progress really, really quickly because during this phase of the first 3 to 4 weeks, you get a lot of what are called neural adaptations or coordination adaptations or demands. Basically, like you can think of it riding a bike. When you first start riding a bike, every single time you jump on that bike, you're going to get exponentially better. That's because your body and your brain are literally developing new motor patterns so you can begin to do things that you were never able to do. And so when you jump on a brand new machine for the first time, you've never done it, the first time you're on it, your brain's not even able to push yourself hard enough. It's not even able to activate muscle fibers that you need to be able to push hard. So every single time you do it, you're going to have these exponential jumps in this progress week to week, all these first few weeks. You're going to be moving up so quickly. But what happens is people get to week 4, week 5, and that progress starts to plateau a little bit and it slows down. And this is because those coordination adaptations are starting to wear off. They're not getting all of those neural changes that contributed to a lot of that progress. And people see this and they get all worried and they start to evaluate prematurely and they say, oh, I have to make an adjustment because my progress, I am slowing down what's going on. So what they think, I'm going to jump to a brand new machine. I'm going to jump to a brand new exercise. And guess what happens? They start seeing progress again. They start jumping up week to week. They're making these new changes. But we know that those are just more neural adaptations. They're breaking through that coordination phase, or they're in the coordination phase. And at the end of those 4 weeks, the exact same cycle happens. They start seeing that plateau again, then they just jump. They evaluate prematurely once again, they adjust to a new machine, and the cycle kind of reinforces itself. And the thing that most people don't understand is if we can sit in that boredom and understand that plateau is part of the process, because it's not actually a plateau, it just means our neural adaptations are wearing off. And that's a good thing, because that means every increase in weight there on out is because we are building more muscle mass, because as we increase muscle mass, we're going to be able to get stronger as well. And after you stick with an exercise for a really long time, you're not going to have those neural adaptations that are pushing you into that next level, which is actually a great thing. That's a slower process and it's a boring process, and people don't want to hear the thing that no, nothing's wrong. You just need to stick with that same exercise. You don't need to change anything else. And you just have to be able to sit in that boredom, which most people can't. And Alex Hormozi has a fantastic quote that I love. He says, 90% of success can be boiled down to doing the obvious thing for an extraordinary period of time without convincing yourself you're smarter than you are. And this applies to everything in life, but truly, truly, truly fitness and health more than anything. You don't need to convince yourself you're smarter than you are when the machine starts to plateau, or the exercise you were chosen starts to plateau or slow down a little bit. You need to stick to the plan. You need to stick to the process. And then after you wait for a long period of time, you go through those first 2 steps of the framework, you start executing, and then you wait long enough, way longer than you probably think. You have to expand our time horizons here. And after you get to there and you're still something's off, then we can reconsider, then we can evaluate and adjust. But if you never give the work time to work, and you're never going to be able to allow it to actually yield the benefits or the outcomes that you're trying to get. And again, it all comes back to the outcomes that we have right now are going to be a direct result of the processes that we have in place. And if we're constantly switching those things up, we're going to get inconsistent results because of that. And so if we can not convince ourselves we're smarter than we are and just allow those processes to work and then adjust based off of that, and we can stick with the boring thing for an extraordinary period of time, that's when all the progress is had. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. In another area, in terms of when you're trying to get leaner and you're trying to lose body fat, which goes into this piece a lot, is kind of the same thing. You may really have this zoomed in persona, or you may have this very zoomed in lens of what the weight loss is doing. So week to week or even day to day, you're saying, why is the scale not jumping down? So we have this very narrow lens on, 2 days ago, I actually got heavier, I jumped up. But a lot of times what's happening here is we are so zoomed in on this bigger map. So if our weight is looking like this giant line across an entire, 16 weeks or whatever it is, and it goes like this, but then we zoom in on just this little section, you might see this little blimp up. And because we're so focused on that, that's all we see, and that's how we view reality. And Tony Robbins talks about this idea that we don't experience reality, we experience the reality that we choose to focus on. And this is exactly what's happening. If we're focusing on this small lens of this giant puzzle, then of course that's all we're gonna see, and that's what we're gonna experience. Oh, why are we not losing weight quick enough? What's going wrong? What do we need to change? We don't need to change anything. We need to let the processes work. We don't need to make those adjustments, because if we zoom out, the processes are work. We have to let the work do its work. And the more we try to rush that and jump to this new plan, or what do we need to change with the diet, immediately we keep restarting because we go back, and it's the same thing. We're going back to those coordination phases. Again, it's a little bit different with nutrition, but it really isn't. We're trying new strategies, and we never let the first strategy get off the ground. And this all goes back to taking things the long, hard, stupid way. People are always looking for the shortcut. So you might jump from one thing to the next thinking, oh, I'm making so much progress, I'm finding the shorter, the quicker route, whereas it just leads us to the exact same place over and over again. If we would have started with the original plan and just saw it through, got through the hard phases, when we saw this dip and didn't just jump to something else, okay, then we start seeing that thing go up again. And that's the exact same idea with fitness, with health, with the rest of our life. There's always going to be these things, and it's so easy to jump ship, and it's so easy to change our idea of what should we be doing, what shortcuts do we need to make to get to our desired outcome way more. But again, going back to Drake's point, he talks about the work's going to work on us more than we're going to work on the work. And that's the same idea here. The process of losing that weight, of building the muscle, of increasing our discipline, of building all these things that we want, these admirable traits, it's not so much of what we're doing that's going to get us to the outcome, or that we should really care about it. So what's the process doing to us, and who are we becoming along that journey? It's the reps and the volume and doing things over and over and over again, the boring way, that makes us who we are. And that's what we should be in this for. It's all about the process. And obviously we want the outcome. That's not going to discredit, we want to get lean, we want to get in the best shape possible, but we can't bypass those reps, because that's actually shaping who we want to become throughout this entire process. And this kind of leads me to another idea that I see so much, especially with kind of the niche that I've been in, which is the science-based lifting, or the very evidence-based approach to all things fitness, which I love. I'm still very much a part of this, because everything should be evidence-based, but we have to understand we need to pick what we should be evidence-based about. And so I've had clients where a lot of times you see these with younger people, and it's not to say that there's anything wrong about that, but there's a big crowd of these more science-based things. The issue here is we start majoring in the minors a lot more, and it kind of goes back to this. We're trying to find the shortcut, the perfect exercise, the perfect resistance profile, or they talk about all these things that, yes, are scientifically accurate. Maybe we're referring to studies and things like that. We're really focused on the minutia, which I love. I love getting really detailed into the optimization. But if we focus on that too early, and we are constantly switching things, it goes back to the same thing. We're not letting the processes work. And so, you can talk about the perfect resistance profile of an exercise all day, but if you don't even understand the basics of how can I show up and do this thing for 6 months in a row, a year in a row, before I care about seeing all these crazy results, that's what matters so much more. And we need to focus on that before we start majoring in those minors. And this is something that I did so much years ago when I was first getting into the whole the health of fitness. I would listen to all the 4-hour podcasts on how to optimize your health, how to optimize your nutrition, how to do all the superfoods, the supplements, all these types of things, or the perfect exercise. I wasn't consistently in the gym. I wasn't working hard. I wasn't pushing close to failure. I wasn't doing the things that actually moved the needle. And so many of us are stuck in this space of we need to optimize, we need to find the perfect shortcut to get there. But again, it all comes back to we need to take this the boring route, the long, hard, stupid way. And if we do that, that's what's going to lead to the long-term outcomes of where we want to go, because that doesn't happen on a 3-month horizon. That doesn't happen oftentimes on a 6-month horizon. But who do we want to be in 3 years from now, 5 years from now? We have to let that happen. And that comes from doing stuff the boring way and just repeating it and being brutally consistent with our efforts and with our processes. So all that to say is we have to understand the magnitude of effect of these types of things. And so if we can detach ourselves from these mechanisms and these very short-term changes in the plan, the week-to-week changes, what do we need to do to optimize right now? Well, maybe that is going to be different than what's going to optimize for 12 weeks or 24 weeks, or the long-term plan of where we're trying to get to. And that's the whole idea for all of this. If we can't do it for that long, then what's the point of any of it? The whole goal of this should be who are we becoming throughout the process so that we can maintain that. And the identity of who we become by laying the boring day in and day out habits that actually get us there, that's what we're focusing on, and anything else. And if we're focused on anything else, then we're kind of lost the plot. We've lost the point of this whole thing. Who are we becoming throughout the entire process? Are we becoming the type of person who can stick to the same plan for an extraordinary period of time without convincing ourselves we're smarter than we are? Because that person is the one who can maintain this change in their identity. They're not just going to be the person who sticks to a meal plan for 3 months, loses the weight, and then gains it all back, which happens way too often. They're not going to be the person who goes to the gym in all of January after the new year, new me, and really sticks to it. They kind of go balls to the wall for that first month, and then they drop back out because they can't stick to it. They don't build the habits. They don't build the foundation. They're trying to find the shortcut. There's no shortcut for putting in the reps. There's no shortcut for putting in the work to actually get us there. We have to do things the boring way, because long term, that's actually the best way. It's actually the fastest way. Slow is often smooth, and smooth is the fastest route that we can take. And if we can really embody that with our training, with our nutrition, with our goals, with anything in life, that's what's going to yield us the best long-term results. It's actually the quickest results, which is almost counterintuitive, but it really, really is. And so the whole point of all of this is kind of the idea that I'm trying to get to is our impatience of trying to rush the progress is often making the progress a lot slower. So with whatever your goals are right now, with whatever you're trying to get to, whether it is trying to lose weight, get leaner, build muscle, whatever it is, maybe you're starting to post on social media, a new career, you're trying to build up, you're trying to build a business, whatever it is, oftentimes the most boring route, the longest route, when we can delay that time horizon, understand that our processes are what matter, and we have to allow those processes to play out. We need to execute on them, and then we need to wait before we do any sort of evaluating, before we do any sort of adjusting. We have to go through that waiting phase of paying down the reps, doing the boring things, paying down our ignorance tax of figuring all these things out, going through the neural adaptations, not zooming in so closely on this weight loss journey or whatever it is. That line can represent anything. It doesn't have to be weight loss. But the progress that we're making, it's gonna look like this if we're super zoomed in, but are we actually going like this long term, which is the whole goal of everything. And if we're doing that on the long-term time horizon, we don't need to be changing everything every single week. And I think the hardest part for people, including myself, is that gap between executing and then that waiting phase, the gap between where the results are really gonna follow through, because those results of those processes, yes, they're going to be a direct outcome of what our processes and our systems are, but a lot of times that is a delayed behind, and it's a lagging result of those processes. So you could be doing the right thing for 3 months and not even notice it, and then one day you see those results and you see the processes really start to take form. But if you change it on one day and you start paying it down and you start eating healthier, you start going to the gym, you're not going to see that payoff in that first day. You have to let those processes start to compound. You have to go through that waiting phase. In the longer term, the longer you can delay that gratification before you want to change everything, before you want to make those adjustments, if you can delay that and you can delay that time horizon, that's when you let the processes start to compound, and that's when you see the best results with your physique, with whatever you're doing. So if there's one takeaway with this, stop trying to fix everything before you know if it works or not, because a lot of the times if we just stick to it and if we just see something through, even if it's not the most optimal or the perfect route, as long as it's action, as long as we're moving in the right direction, that's so much better than anything and trying to switch and trying to find the perfect thing. Imperfect action is always going to win. Imperfect action is the key to seeing success, because we learn along the way more than trying to figure it out right at the start, because we don't have enough data. We don't have enough evidence to base our decisions off of, and we need that evidence, we need that data, but the only way we get that data is by putting in the reps, going through it, continuing to show up day in and day out, and then from there, okay, 3 months, 6 months, what's working, what's not working, let's make these subtle tweaks. And it's not usually these giant switches, it's a little bit here and there, and it just takes showing up, and it just takes doing things the boring long way. One of my favorite things to do on client check-ins, which I do every week with clients, is we'll be looking over everything, and at the end of it, and if hopefully a lot of the times we don't even have to change much of the thing, so I'm going to say everything's perfect, no changes. And a lot of the times people, especially newer to the program, are going to be like, what do you mean we're not switching the exercises, we're not doing anything? And I ask them, did everything go well last week? Are we exactly where we should be? Why are we wanting to change these things? And everyone was looking for this novel idea, this new stimulus that we think we need. We constantly think we need this switch up, but a lot of times we don't. We just need to do the exact same thing for another week, and then another week, and then another month, and then another year. And if you let those processes play out, that's when the outcomes are going to follow in the long term. And so I speak about this stuff, but it's exactly what I'm working through as well. I've kind of figured it out in the fitness realm, and that's what I help people with now. But even with content, that's what I'm trying to dive into this now. And I'm trying to take imperfect action, taking these videos. It's probably not going to be perfect, and I hope I look back in a year from now thinking, wow, this really sucked. But that's what you have to go through. And it's the same thing. I'm in a lot better shape now, and I have the physique that I've always wanted. I can look back at a year from now and be like, oh my gosh, what were you doing? But I can't do that because he was taking action, and that's what you have to be proud of. You have to take that imperfect action. You have to show up, because you're going to learn along the way. But there's no shortcuts to that. You have to do the boring stuff. And the boring stuff right now is me sitting down to this camera, really not know what I'm talking about, kind of going off the cuff, and just laying it out there. And hopefully every single time I do this, it's going to get better and better, because that's what it requires. Doing things the boring way. There's no way for me to get better at talking to a camera like this, or filming content, or doing anything like that besides actually doing it. Sure, you can look up all the hacks, or you can look up the new exercises, or you can try to figure it out, but trying to jump around all the time is the exact same thing as jumping machines, or switching the plan up when 1 week doesn't go perfectly. You have to let the results go in, and before I can evaluate and make adjustments, I have to take the action, I have to execute, and I have to wait. And this is the waiting. It's a tough gap that nobody really talks about, but it's the key to that long-term success. And so if I can leave you with something here, don't worry about making all the progress today. It's not going to happen. And you're going to just constantly try to make all the progress the next day, and then you won't be able to do it. And then the next day, I'm going to try to make all the progress. And then you're going to get however long down the road from that, and you're like, wow, I've made no progress. Whereas if you can decide right now, I'm going to start making whatever progress I can today, maybe just a little bit, and then I'm going to try to do a little bit the next day, and a little bit the next day. And I'm just going to keep showing up and doing it again and again. Long term, you're going to make so much more progress than the first person, or the first scenario of you who tried to do it all at once but never could do any at all. So with all of this, we're just going to keep trusting the process. We're going to keep showing up. We're going to take imperfect action, because that's all you really can do. And that imperfect action leads to a little bit of refinement every single time, that waiting, the executing, and then we adjust, and then we evaluate these things, and then we can make those changes. And yes, that's the boring route, but it's the only route if we want the real outcomes that we're after. We're changing the processes a little bit, but we have to let those processes pay out. So I hope you took something from this video. Maybe not. I don't know how many people are still left here, but if you are, let's look back at 1 year from now and seeing how much I've let these processes actually pay off, because that's the whole idea with all this. So I appreciate you guys watching. If anyone made it this far, let me know if you did in the comments, or if you have any questions or anything like that. Keep trusting the process, keep showing up, and keep taking imperfect action.